All right, so my name is Adrian Rosa. I'm the chair of the Development Review Board. We'll be calling today the third meeting to order. We have a relatively light agenda, so we'll certainly be deliberating on any items we actually may not have any to deliberate on. At the end of the meeting, we go in the order which they appear on the agenda. And the first item we have on our agenda is ZP 21-323 59-61 Spruce Street. Meredith White and Thomas Kelly, Lewis Creek Builders, application to demolish garage and construct new garage. It's the applicant here. So this has been marked on our consent agenda item, right? Which means that, you know, staff has reviewed it and thinks that it is a relatively simple project for approval. Typically, we ask the board if they have any objection to marking this, treating this as a consent item. Any questions? Having anything? Nothing? Have you seen the staff comments? Is there anything in there that you need to address or want to address?
I have seen the staff comments. I don't think there is. The only thing that carried over from the DAB was a request to have exposed rafter tanks, which matches the existing, which we're not opposed to.
Okay, and then is there anyone online to speak on this application?
So raise your hand. I have a couple folks online, but no hands raised.
All right, so that, I guess I'll just do it. I'll make a motion that on CP 21-323, we approve the application and adopt staff's findings and recommendations.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Good luck. All right, so the next item on our agenda is a sketch plan, which, you know, an applicant's requested. We don't do sketch plan findings or conclusions. We don't issue a decision on sketch plan or give sketch plan approval.
We almost have that.
We are happy to respond to the applicant, but again, the sketch plan's non-binding and it's an opportunity for the applicant to do whatever it thinks it wants to DRB, frankly. You know, we've got what I'll describe as in this project extraordinarily 10,000, probably like 30,000 foot description of a potential project, but beyond that, not a lot. So I'll turn over to you guys to tell us what you think we should hear in the scope of our sketch plan review and let's go your questions.
Start with some introductions, AJ? Sure. I'm John Kahlo, representing Roger Bike, which is one of the 3 parcels included in this sketch plan PUD application. The other 2 entities include the city of Burlington and Champlain College. Zach Nersinger is here from CEDO, as well as Chapin Spencer, representing the city. We got Nick Anderson from Champlain College, Kevin Warden from Engineering Ventures, which will be doing civil engineering associated with the project. And joining us remotely is Will Fleissig. Will is a development consultant that is engaged by Roger Bike and assisting in the overall planning exercise for the Secord project.
You forgot me.
Oh, and Nick, how could I forget you? And Todd Sorrento, Director of Operations, and the guy that finishes all my sets.
Thank you.
Sorry, Todd. So let's see, maybe we could just start with a general description of you've got a bunch of information in your packet. Cover letter, a lot of documentation as well as the staff notes, 15 pages. So I think, you know, kind of the real high level is, you know, is when we look at this is how does a community like Burlington transition from being the big town in a small rural state to being a vibrant, compact urban area. And maybe more specifically, how do we transform 13 acres of surface parking lots into a forward-looking, pedestrian-friendly, sustainable, mixed-use, mixed income neighborhood? And so the three entities, have been asking themselves and together that very question. So that's really kind of where we've been at for the past, it's gotta be, going on a year. So there's been a lot of work that's gone on in terms of collaboration to get us to this point. One thing is that we've got that we're building on is the zoning overlay district that the city passed last summer, the South End Innovation District, which would allow for a mixed-use project like this. And then since then, we've been working with a variety of community stakeholders on various elements. We've had roundtable discussions in the springtime dealing with housing, what kind of housing, elderly, affordable, market rate, workforce housing, and really trying to really expand that piece of it. We've had workshops on sustainability, on mobility. The city of Burlington, working with the two partners, funded a public realm study to really sort of analyze what kind of public realm, would we have. And maybe Scott, if you could go to that slide. Yeah, that's it. So this is like a depiction of a generalized block and parcel layout, which shows the 13.3 acres contained in the application as a series of private development areas and proposed rights of way. So and this is really kind of the fundamental organizing principle that the site plan is really based on. Once you've got a mobility network, then the balance of the property is what will be those developable parcels. So what we did is we looked at creating a system of rights of way that could support multimodal forms of travel and vehicular, bicycle, pedestrian. Something that is very forward and something that is based on the great street standards that's something that the city of Burlington has adopted. So, and the three parcels, the three property owners have agreed that we clapped our hands over this scenario. So to me, that's a big deal that we got to that point. Because once you've got that, then Scott, if you want to just toggle to the next slide. Now you can begin to imagine a development program that applies all the regulatory tools that are in the South End Innovation District overlay in terms of building height, footprint, different housing typologies. So it's really kind of that's where we are really at the moment. We've got a mobility network that the parties have agreed to that seem to do a lot of different things in terms of accommodating multiple modes of travel, but it is also outward looking. One of the things that we're trying to do in this project is not be a gated community, but be something that is larger, is part of something larger, the South End network. And so what this public realm design provides is the opportunities to extend out to Pond Street to the east, to make connections so that it is not just one insular building development, but part of a larger South End network. So, those are the in terms of the high points of where we've been and where we are, Evan is here and one of the things that we've been working on and one of the challenges that we're going to face as a community is infrastructural challenges, in particular wastewater and storm, to the greatest extent wastewater, and being able to provide a conveyance system that gets it down to the sewage treatment plant. So we've done some studies of just high level what could potentially happen.
I guess I'm just,
Yeah.
you know, I see these blocks here and I get the impression, looking at this, and that's what I'm not sure I should be getting any impression from this, but the impression I get is I'm looking at something similar to the scale of Cambrian Rise. Is that the intention for what I'm looking at? If these are, you know, 4 or 5 story buildings taking the whole space, or am I looking at a variety of heights? Is there some thought on that yet, or am I?
Yeah, no, there is
too far ahead?
There has been some thought on that, and Charles Dillard is not here, the city planner. But what you see is a variety of housing typologies.
Well, I can't tell.
Yeah, we don't see any.
We just see blocks right now. We don't know what they're really
So
representing.
over on that, right. There is a variety of housing typologies, but I mean, having said that, this is an urban development. And you know, we haven't really taken any cues from Cambrian Rise. But you know, to the extent that there are buildings in that neighborhood and proposed buildings in this neighborhood that could be, you know, 8, 9 stories, those are those larger blocks. Over on the left-hand side are more of a typology that's not unlike the Lakeside neighborhood. You know, townhouses, row houses.
That's what I mean, even though you know, you're not held to like this block is this. It'd be nice to hear some
Yeah,
view
there's a
of
pretty
what you're looking at.
clear prescriptive description in the SEID South End Innovation District overlay. And it's kind of represented here in the shading. The west side, I think, is limited to 4 stories. And then the middle portion bumps up to 6, and then the east side bumps up to 8. There's provisions in the ordinance that allow for an extra story if affordable housing at a certain rate is included. So in a lot of ways, as some, you know, AJ, as you said, this is a 30,000 foot view, because in some ways we're here as a sketch plan for a subdivision, you know, an 8 lot subdivision or however many lots there are in sublots. In other ways, we're starting to set the table for a much more detailed and extensive urban development.
This conversation begets a question I have, which is, are we going to be asked to look at this on a sort of master plan level, in the sense of these are the parcel layouts, these are the building layouts. We don't know whether we're going, you know, we're looking at doing this many tens of thousands of square foot of commercial space and this many tens of thousands of square feet of housing space, and with a maximum of, because you got a wastewater issue, right? So we gotta talk bedrooms, but this many bedrooms and this many dwelling units, right? Because that's also a consideration.
Yep.
But, and so our traffic analysis is built on that cap essentially. And our, you know, we're gonna do the streetscape, and this is what that's gonna look like, and this is what. But we don't know how we're gonna allocate and divide amongst the various things. Is that sort of where this is going to go first? You're gonna say, look, we want 1,000 daily trip ends, and we don't know how we're gonna split out those 1,000 daily trip ends, whether it's gonna be 3-bedroom units or 2-bedroom units in building A and this many. Is that where it's gonna go? Because one of the things that I thought of when looking at this is, we're not talking Act 250, I don't think here, but you know, we could have 19 different dash amendments before I see which shovel gets in the ground. And one of the things that I've proven, for me, since I've been here since the beginning of it, frustrating with Cambrian Rise is that there's a dozen amendments every time something happens, so. you know, are you looking at it to come in and go, we don't know how we're gonna do the mix, we want a subdivision, we want this many unit, you know, this much traffic, it's an estimation. And then as each individual building is proposed for development, we come in and just focus on that building.
I think that can be a combination. Maybe Scott, could you go back to this, the slide? So I mean, what we've done, to AJ, to your point, is that we've taken a block and lot scenario that complies with the new zoning. And then we've extrapolated building outlines, you know, that meet the 15,000 square foot maximum or different. And then we've extrapolated, we've made assumptions on unit size. So we've come up to a theoretical, you know, maximum, call it round numbers, 1,400 units. You know, but it could be more or it could be less, depending on what the unit counts are. So we've just extrapolated all of those, and the same thing with parking spaces. And that we could have a situation where we come in for this theoretical upset of dwelling units, wastewater gallons per day, trip ends, and we're working off an upper limit of menu, if you will, of the cumulative impacts. And that maybe, and that's sort of that, to your master plan comment, maybe that's on the global 13.3 acres. And that using a PUD approval, we have a lot of flexibility as the market change or as things change, but we're gonna be limited by those upset numbers.
Yeah, because at least I think it would be
So I mean, just
a
to,
disservice to have to debate all of the same traffic, wastewater, all of that, every single time a building comes in for development.
no, I agree. You know, our hope is.
We don't wanna come 13 times out.
No, so just think, I mean, maybe you've already thought through that, like, I think that's very important to get out.
So that we would have on the front end, there's an agreement of those maximum impacts. And then as the project is developed in phases by individual buildings, then the design and the site plan of those individual buildings. And we're keeping a running tab of where we match up with all of those other impacts. So into the future, it's just those architectural and design elements that are at play and not the underlying impacts. Does that make
And how it fits into that overall
Yes,
curriculum and maybe tweak on that.
Yeah.
And so it sounded like with sketch plan, you know, this is what it's supposed to be, is this kind of discussion. But it also implies that you're gonna be coming back with an actual application. And it sounds like that first application may be this subdivision.
it
set
could
up
be that
with numbers.
it's block 1 and block 2. I mean, we don't know.
There's gonna be layers of applications, unfortunately. There
Yeah.
will be a subdivision,
Yeah,
preliminary and final. There will be a PUD, which I think, Scott, is also preliminary and final, just overall one time.
If you combine the two, it's preliminary final for the whole thing. If you do like Cambria Rise, they're split.
Okay, we'll try to combine.
One PUD.
Okay,
thanks.
we're taking a lot of direction from Scott and suggestions. But we do need to do a subdivision before we would, and then you were about to say phase 1, which
Right.
is where we would come in with a detailed development proposal and site plan, and all of this is what the buildings are gonna look like on phase 1, which is the blocks that border Lakeside, which obviously Lakeside, which requires the least amount of infrastructure. It starts just to define that streetscape. And we're after many, months of working with the city, kind of understand where current capacity issues are and can kind of tailor to match and work within those current capacities before additional capacity.
So the maximum numbers will be generated in the subdivision PUD application and then flushed out in these other applications subsequent.
Being 3 entities, is that 3 entities seeking subdivision approval? Or is it gonna be, are you gonna make it 1 entity? Are you gonna do a lot line adjustment and make it all 1 entity? Or are the 3 entities gonna be preserved throughout the whole process?
I don't think our understanding is they don't need to be. At some point in the future, that the city of Burlington, owner of 68 Sears Lane, or Champlain College, owner of 175, could decide, we're gonna go up and but they would be bound by whatever.
I think they'd all have
development
signatures
restrictions.
for that application.
Yeah, so right now there's 3 actual applications, because we have 3 lots, and each lot needs kind of each parent lot kind of has with it the ongoing history of what's happening. But then, as John was saying, once the PUD is approved, there could be, everyone could continue to work together, or there could be separate applications made. Obviously under the umbrella of a memorandum agreement between the parties.
I just wanted to state for the record, I was involved in advocacy for this zoning change. We're not making any decisions, but I just wanted that out there, and I don't think it'll impede my ability to make a non-biased decision if we do come to it.
I'll note that my partner Jeremy does some development agreement work on this project and other projects for the city, but I don't see any conflict here. Benefit.
I was curious, I know one of the issues that's been brought up or as a concern from Lakeside Timber is parking. And I know there's a parking garage built into this. As somebody who works at Hula, some of the spaces currently there are kind of reserved as additional spaces for some of the tenants there. So I'm curious, is a plan to move some of that visitor and tenant, like additional tenant parking to the garage or accommodate that? And then also, are the street parking spaces, I guess Chapin, this is a question for you, are the street parking spaces gonna be metered like the downtown one, or is that decision just not been made?
I think the Hula spaces that you're talking about in the first part of your question will most likely migrate over to Hula. We have access parking because of COVID, we kind of overshot. Now we're kind of right sizing, and we'll move the 100 or so people that regularly park in that lot. We have space for them behind. So right now, that's the plan.
And then on your question, Evan, about the on-street parking, no decision's been made yet. We are having a conversation about whether these would be city streets, if all of them would be city streets, some of them. And ultimately, Public Works' position is that the streets need to be built to city standard, whether or not they're gonna be city streets or private streets, given that often over time, property owners petition the city to accept the streets, and we're not going to accept a street that's not up to standard.
I have 3 questions. Remind me whether the parkway was designed to have turning lanes, or would that mean redesign of that section of the parkway?
So currently, that section of the parkway is limited access, designated limited access from the interstate down to Lakeside Avenue. There are no breaks in access except at cross streets. As part of the ongoing effort to right-size the Parkway project, there were multiple negotiations with V-Trans around the city's interest that the Parkway is not built and left, but is a living kind of design that can evolve as the needs of the neighborhood design evolve. So it is our expectation, and there is a written letter between V-Trans and the city, that once the Parkway is complete, which is projected to be in 2026, that we could petition V-Trans to make changes. And as you're noting here, there's a proposed intersection. And in V-Trans' letter, it says that V-Trans would be open to considering, no promises, on-street parking, mid-block crosswalks, breaks in access. But those things need to be evaluated once the project's complete. So I think the goal here, we designed a 25-mile-an-hour road. We know to fully make it a 25-mile-an-hour road, we need friction. And friction is mid-block crossings, it's on-street parking, those types of things.
But that opens up potential for provide EIS and then more public input on the possibility of, what would be required to have new access?
Right, and I think that's why V-Trans is stating not until the project's complete.
Yeah.
So it can be based on actuals, we're not using, old modeling data.
So that puts a delay in this plan that we're looking at, that you can't really say that this is the plan you want to do if without the state approval.
Not necessarily, right?
Well, the 26, they can't evaluate until 26, the 27 probably.
Yeah, I mean, we could
But here we are,
we could certainly,
24.
we could certainly make a note. I'm not gonna make an approval saying like. When V-Trans builds a road, you can do something is a famously bad idea in permitting, famously. So. We would take that into it's important to note that that's hypothetical, right?
Keep in mind, the city's one of the partners, and as a group, we're not gonna ask for approval to something we know you can't get.
Right,
So-
or you can't commit to.
Right, yeah, so I mean, we might, for example, show this lot layout with a right of way at the crossing and show that, either A, that, could eventually be a vehicular crossing, B, if that's never allowed, it could be a pedestrian point of crossing. Or C, it could be removed, or it could be a dead end back lane, or eventually it could be removed with a boundary line adjustment, in the future.
Jeff, you had your hand up a second.
I was just gonna ask for a little more information on how you came up with this particular layout. We see one layout. Could change, as you just said, but what other configurations did you consider and why does this seem like the right layout? And I'm also particularly interested in connections over to Lakeside and bike paths and how you thought that through.
Good question. The distances, we felt that the block lengths between Lakeside Avenue and Sears Lane, by incorporating two cross streets, the block length is not that much different than a downtown. It's just shorter, but appreciably shorter. And it seems counterintuitive, but that, at least our traffic consultant was very persuasive in convincing us that if you really, really want to decrease trip ends, having more opportunity to cross is a safer way and will reduce speed and will reduce trip ends. People will get out of their car and literally will walk in the network in this district. So if that's really kind of the high level goal that we all want to achieve, that's really kind of what drove it. Now, we understand that there's no guarantee, and Chapin, has made it clear that despite, him being an advocate for the project and these kind of changes, that there's no guarantee that the state will back, two intersections. But, we feel that this was preferable and a more optimum solution as opposed to maybe having one smack dab in the middle between Lakeside Avenue. Seriously.
There was also, the SEID has a maximum per block perimeter, so I think another way to do this would have been in thirds or fourths rather than sixths, and I think that would have exceeded that maximum block perimeter. So the SEID developed by planners was echoing the same thing the traffic consultant was saying, bringing the scale down.
And also wanted to design to really try, initially we designed this as a car-free environment, actually. I mean, that was pie in the sky, but really to keep cars to the perimeter so pedestrians can be more in the center. That was one of the design principles, things we were working around. And also to create where we think we could potentially create some good intersections that ultimately in the future would connect over to Pine Street. So that is another reason for some of the placements of the cross streets.
Jeff asked about connection with the Lakeside neighborhood. Is it Harriman?
Harrison.
Harrison Ave is where the railroad crossing is.
Yeah.
That's maintained in there's another exhibit, I don't know if it's in
Is
this.
that the connectivity?
Next slide shows it better.
Yeah. Maybe the next slide.
So there's parkland visible. Make that connection.
So there's the bicycle connection there. Improved bicycle connection and also.
Don't wanna just maintain that.
But what is maintained is the emergency vehicle access.
Right.
But not regular vehicle access.
And I saw the different options for that sort of main street, I'm not sure what's labeled on there, but looked like there were two-way options, one-way options.
Yeah.
Pedestrian focused, as you were talking about, like, when does that commitment get
Well-
made, and does that, when you come to us for this subdivision approval?
I think we were looking at it on a phased basis in that in phase one, assuming phase one was that northerly block, that it would require, our assumption is that the city would require two-way traffic. But that as the development proceeded south into multiple future phases, that if you look at the sections that accompany that innovation lane, that it's a one-way vehicular with pedestrian connection as well as two-way bike connection.
But are you saying you're gonna try to preserve the flexibility to choose as you develop, or when you come back to us with an application, you're gonna say, this is how the street's gonna look this whole way?
Mhm.
That's what I'm trying to.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, especially, there are two options. That's not a yes question, it's which option.
Is gonna require that.
And
So I think.
I think we're gonna have a phased an application that shows phases.
Yeah, but I think to join the two ideas, I think what Jeff's saying is wise, is when we get this application, and even the initial subdivision with the road layouts in it, I think we'd like to see what the roads will look like. You know, this is what they'll look like first, phase one, and then this is what they'll look like second. I think that's an important part of the initial approval. I don't think we wanna say, well, in year 5 or year 7, when you come back for a different phase, you have this menu option for streetscape improvement.
Oh, no, I wasn't
Yeah,
suggesting.
I mean, I guess put another way, a lot of times with these large projects, I have concerns that beginning the initial approvals, there's a layout of nice amenities that will be. And those streetscapes include some really nice amenities for pedestrians. I don't wanna be in a position of approving something at an initial phase that says this is what it's gonna look like. And then that doesn't actually ever happen. Now, I understand it's changed, you may come back for an amendment. But I'd rather us all be on the same page, that when we're approving this layout and the subdivision and the streets, that we have a pretty good expectation you are going to build the streets, even if in phases, so that they ultimately look like this. We don't approve a pedestrian scape that 10 years from now turns into just a two-way. That's why I'm communicating. Because it's really the most public facing aspect of the project is that streetscape.
Jacob, did I misspeak?
Well, I had heard a question about permitting if we can't get breaks and access into the parkway. And I wanted to respond to that one because I think it's important in that the understanding is that there would be a traffic impact statement that would work either with or without breaks and access into the Champlain Parkway, such that you all felt comfortable to permit phase one with the understanding that this is gonna work either way. There's an optimal design layout for the whole master plan, but this will work without a break in access.
And I did want to note, I looked at your traffic study methodology and, I don't know if you want to talk about that tonight or not. In our view, first thing is, what does Public Works think? Do they approve the methodology? Are they comfortable with the methodology? And then 2, which I didn't know was, when you apply that methodology, are you saying with this proposed entrance break into the Champlain Parkway or without, right? Because it's hypothetical, but without. If we can't commit to it being there, let's say that, we dealt with that a lot when we did the city market down in the south end, with some other stuff in the south end, how to deal with the Champlain Parkway. And fundamentally, the best answer is, if it's there, calculate accordingly, and if it's not there, don't calculate.
Yes, we have reviewed, Public Works is wearing two hats, and we need to make sure we honor the regulatory role here. And that our city engineer has taken, Laurel Wheelock, taken a look at the methodology, found it to be generally acceptable. Obviously, there's some approaches here that are being proposed, such as deductions of vehicle trips for internal capture that we need to be comfortable with so that the projections of vehicle trips are defensible.
And with that capture, right, one of the issues is it seems like a relatively high number for internal capture. And I understand the intent is to be ride your bike. Hence the name. You can walk, that's great. But again, if we're talking about a project approval that looks at a cap, right, take that into consideration when you're making an estimate about trip ends, because if we get down the line, it's like got 3 trip ends left, that's gonna affect what we do later.
Well, and then, you know, to that point, you don't want to shortchange yourself and have spent all your savings by the time you get to block 8.
Right.
And block 8 was an important part of that development.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think to your point on trip ends or internal capture, the mobility hubs are going to be an important component of that too. It's not just parking structure. It's a bus terminal, a car shed bullet, and a bike shed bullet. That's what's going to help your either internal capture or your car light lifestyle choices. Being able to walk over to a bus terminal 1 block away instead of that coming online as the 8th phase.
Is the idea for this to be sort of full mixed use with office space, retail space, and residential space? I'm looking at the wrong guy.
That's what the zoning district.
Yeah, the zoning requires,
Was a.
Requires full.
the upper floor is mostly residential, and in the lower floors, there's a percentage of non-residential required.
Right.
That's in the application, I'm not sure I have a typical time.
Every building would have,
Office, I don't know, but
would every building have a mix of
yes,
each?
yeah.
And I think what I think the 3 parties agree that if we can use south end, existing uses, Champlain College, classroom space, the generator, makerspace, populate rather than relying on, we don't really want to compete with Pine Street retail or services, but rather complement. Which is,
I'm sorry, I heard a daycare.
right, sure, is it when we've had conversations with a daycare about occupancy, for example.
One of the things that's worth mentioning is the difference between Innovation Lane and Railroad Lane, because I think you said how the middle wants to be reserved for people, and that's because even though it looks like we've got a road right up the middle, it's a very limited access. There's not a lot of demand to bring your car there because there's very little parking access proposed. Most of the spots are accessible to get into those ground floor uses, but otherwise the main point of access is along the railroad for arrivals and departures of parking or on those cross streets. So that's a little bit of the intent around circulation.
One thing I would consider is how that crossing at Harrison interacts with the overall design. I would strongly encourage making that welcoming. So I'm thinking about at least my neighborhood and people who live in my neighborhood, and I go down that Harrison 4 times a week, right? I'm running on the bike path, I'm doing those things. If I could cross over and into this project that way, I'm much more inclined to ride my bike or walk than if I have to go all the way to Lakeside and cut over. And making that welcoming and making that inviting, I think will go a long way in inviting that people.
Look at Harrison.
Yeah, Harrison connection.
I think that's the point.
Over the railroad
Kind of
connection.
widen
Yes.
it,
Make it nice.
But it's also make it nice on the other side, right?
Where you end up where they
Yeah.
can get, because right now, you just end up, you don't really end up somewhere.
No, that's,
Yeah, and it's,
Draw me in is what I'm
you
saying.
can see there's kind of a green space shown there, which pulls you right into the center spine innovation lane. That's the intent.
It's a great collection of street cats there.
And similarly, we'll have a lot of people coming from the development to the bike.
Right.
So it has to be welcoming both ways.
On block 3 and block 6, where it appears to be more like townhouse style, is that correct? Is the right of way kind of behind those, are those alleys publicly accessible, or are those planned to be part of the
Right
town?
along the railroad?
Yeah, so kind of one,
Railroad lane, right?
well, but one like space in, there's like a little kind of plus, like cross section. And also where the park is on block 5.
I think it's all this, yeah, so those internal green spaces are likely to be private but publicly accessible. Like we've heard from parks, they don't need more parks to manage. Does that answer your question?
Feel like common space.
Yeah, common space and people walking through or.
so it could be a
Fine to walk through.
association that's managing it. But to be.
Yeah, understood, yeah.
Also, I think perhaps also the internal space for block 3 and block 5, those would be bikeable, those would be publicly accessible paths or really meant for the 4 buildings that surround that.
Good question, Leo. I mean, I think coming through Harrison, we're gonna want a publicly kind of bike accessible.
Yeah.
Connection through the middle of the east-west connection, the north-south, I don't know that we know yet. Yeah.
I guess another way to think about it is the commercial buildings on the east side of blocks 3 and block 5.
Yeah.
Might they have storefronts opening onto the interior of the block?
They might, there was, I think, one exhibit that we shared in the public realm that was color coded. That had, most active, passive, and that could help.
I see.
Keep in mind, this east-west dimension is not typical downtown blocks, so it's not like a downtown where an alley makes, sense because the buildings are
It's
so
really
long.
tight and narrow.
And pretty tight, yeah, so.
How long is that Center Street? Like Lakeside to.
You mean the distance from Lakeside to Sears Lane?
It's 1,000 feet from Lakeside to Sears.
It's less than I thought, less than a
1,000
quarter,
feet.
less than a quarter mile.
Yeah,
Yes.
it looks long here.
And then there has to be some consideration too for kind of back of house uses, trash collection, those kind of things, we don't want those all spelled out on the street. If you design a beautiful streetscape right up the middle, you gotta have to account for those, so a lot of those alleys and lanes might help with those services.
Question, Kevin, about wastewater. Yeah. I'm guessing you determined that the existing capacity under Pine Street is inadequate, so you'd have to build a whole second sewer service line under Pine?
Yeah,
Is that gonna be
that's-
parallel to the existing, and it's gonna be just for this, or so it's a second parallel line under Pine?
Yeah, so, again, we've been working closely with DPW and Water Resources, and they have their consultants that are modeling the entire city and certainly this portion. And for anyone that's lived and worked on Pine Street, during heavy rainstorms, you may have seen the floating manholes. At least I recall them, and that is a function of combined water wastewater coming down the hill, and I think as many as 6 to 8 to 10 times a year having combined sewer overflows, which are not allowed by the state. So we look at a lot of different solutions, and the one we're narrowing in on is a dedicated force main. It could be directionally drilled all the way up Pine Street, 5,000 feet per mile. Pine Street is about elevation 110 from here to Kilburn Gatesville, right? So pretty flat. And the existing system is gravity that brings in both water, wastewater and stormwater. So this would be a dedicated line And certainly for this neighborhood, for wastewater,
Yeah.
and certainly for this neighborhood, it would allow it to proceed without contributing to or increasing combined sewer overflows. And we've talked with the city about the future potential of even taking existing wastewater flows, putting them into that dedicated force main, which would help mitigate some of the existing issues.
And does that get constructed before phase one with phase?
So we're really getting into details now, yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, but that might be good detail.
It is, we've talked about it.
We have.
There is capacity in the Pine Street existing sewer during dry weather for the amount of wastewater we're looking. So the requirement we're looking
You
at.
only occupy the structures during dry weather.
Yeah, exactly. No toilet flushing.
Entire flat on the bottom.
Yeah. What we're looking at is a storage solution for those wet weather events that holds our flows and then discharges to the gravity system when there's dry weather conditions. And
For phase one.
for phase one there. And the overall concept is that storage later then becomes what we call a wet well for the future pump station, so we're not building something unnecessary.
I mean, I think this would have to get worked out probably to the application side, but there are some challenges with that wastewater line on a permit side, because the permit would have to extend to some level through Pine Street across every property that line would cross. They'd have to at least agree to that, because you can't approve construction associated with the project on offsite property.
It's just in the right of way.
It'd be in the
It's fully in the right of way.
fully right.
Well,
Yeah,
this-
well, I can't guarantee it's fully right. No, it'd be a.
Is he's paving the road down,
No, it would be direction of the board, and it would be principally in the right of way, but there are some areas that it would cross private property and that would require easement agreements.
Right.
There are some in place that we may be able to take advantage of, but there are others that we need to require.
But that easement agreements could be combined with alternative 1B, which is to shoot over Curtis lumber down the road.
We're exploring, likely the alignment along Pine Street would be all within the right of way. The question is, how does it get from Pine Street to the plant? Do you go across the rail yard property? And that would be part of, the planning that needs to happen here before we have a fully baked proposal.
Would this require more disturbance on Pine Street to the extent of like Pine Street pavement being taken off?
Yes, I mean, we are having conversations, Kevin's mentioned multiple times about directionally drilling, though even with directional drill, there will be some surface disruption. And so there are also multiple routes to the wastewater plant that, we don't have a conceptual design at this point. But I think here the good news is that there's an interim phase one approach that we need to fully run to ground, but holds promise. And a long-term approach that could not only help create opportunity here for this project, but also potentially address wider South End issues. That I think one of the pieces DPW wants to share with you all is that this lack of capacity on the Pine Street line is not only an issue for this development, but many other properties in the South End. And so it could be that a project like this can help resolve a broader problem.
So one concept is that new line would be dedicated to this, it'd be city infrastructure. Is that right? The project would fund its construction and potentially the city would.
The terms of the development and the operation of this facility all need to be negotiated, but clearly, the hope from the city side is that the private project assists with the long-term solution. And that it's not serving just the project, but serving the broader south end.
This is a question for staff. If the city is a part applicant, right, because it owns a parcel of land, does that trigger 424, if you say 4413, a limitation in review?
I don't think it does because it talks about owned and operated by, so unless the city wants to get into that housing business, it's probably not.
That's what I assumed, I was doing that.
What section was that, AJ?
Municipal limitations on municipal bylaws.
It comes up with all the university.
Okay, yeah.
I just as comment, that's what I'm supposed to be getting at this point. And this may be totally premature, but you got these streetscapes going, what are they, A1 or different options and stuff. It strikes me that the streets are designed as one-sided. Is that intentional? It looks a little off balance. I think about a streetscape and what people like in a city is, you know, two sides of the street with trees and stuff like that. So what's this about?
So, yeah, a couple of things, sunlight, you know, for example, as we worked on Great Streets downtown and worked with the city arborist. He's just, you know, on the north side of the building, he's throwing up his hands and like, I don't care if you put trees there, but let's get them on the north side of the right of way. Just in terms of how well they're gonna do. And I should point out, these are not your standard 66-foot, you know, 3-rod roads. 4-rod roads, they're 50.5.
So these are
They're a little narrow.
Inferno streets that we're looking at
That's right.
I
here.
think it's primarily Innovation Way.
Right. But so the parkway already has some trees on it, is that true?
Yes.
They don't show up on this.
No,
Correct.
so they're already there.
So that's, so this is really just the internal, smaller streets.
Yeah, right. And they are just kind of out of like Railroad Lane, there's, the west side is on street, on surface parking. Innovation Lane, I forget, did we alternate sides at one point? You know, we just kind of have a snapshot of it, but
I'm
it's not
just throwing
parking
out
both sides.
space for the scale, having some variety to it. Whether it's done with trees or just the buildings or something happening, so that it's not 1,000 feet of 8 stories.
Yep.
Right.
And then there are, right, along different parts of Innovation Lane, different requirements for ground floor uses.
Yeah.
So some of those are gonna be residential ground floor uses versus commercial. And I think that warrants a slightly different typology on that street of what's in front of it, right? So I don't think the streets need to be symmetrical anymore. I think we can help them evolve and have them kind of keep whatever is adjacent to it, the cafe, kind of expectation there, and that have a much wider streetscape to be able to have tables and chairs.
Yeah, you have something.
Yes.
No, I have one other.
Treating this as a whole system in terms of mechanical systems and energy efficiency, I know there are downsides to thinking about it all as one project, but I know a lot of projects recently have done geothermal, and there's other ways of thinking about this as one system to do energy efficiency. Is that any consideration with that?
We have, and Pula is heated and cooled with groundwater. Champaign College, about 30% of their footprint. We've drilled a well at 125, and it yields a lot of water coming off the hill. And I think that, yes, so that is something that we're very interested in pursuing, whether it's on a district-wide or more iterative, needs to be designed. But we think that this would be, again, very consistent with the forward-looking sustainable sort of approach to this development.
Sorry,
No, go for it.
can you say a little more about, I didn't follow the overlay discussion a lot, but it's from your comment about not taking away from Pine Street economically. I'm also thinking a little bit just about downtown in general. How do we design this, develop this in a way that follows your intention of complementing the existing
Yeah,
vitality we have already without kind of sucking it and relocating.
to the extent that we can make these physical connections, if there's 1,400 dwelling units on these 13 acres that can walk over to Pine Street, it's just gonna enrich that environment. Measurably. And so, Todd mentioned earlier, I mean, just these cross streets and even if they're just pedestrian connections, but trying to make this as permeable as we can. Both, to the north to Lakeside Avenue, into the neighborhood. I mean, anything that we can do to make this part of something larger. I think it's gonna benefit the community, the larger community. So that's.
And the location of the mobility hub / parking structure, also having that centrally located should also benefit the existing buildings and businesses on Pine Street, and also probably maybe allow them to reimagine their own buildings.
And I don't think breweries are allowed in this override.
No.
Which is the boon, is good for wastewater and good for the establishments on Pine Street.
Yeah, because my big concern is that we never lose sight of the need for the housing here, right? I know that's not gonna be the case, but.
And we think from a trip generation point of view, that's a problem that's solving itself to a certain degree, workforce housing, whatever you wanna call it, but we've got the demand. We're looking to help with the supply housing.
My other comment was in the design. It seems to me that the desire is to create. And I'm gonna say this two ways, one probably. Some less magnanimous approach, and the other one more is to create a community that. Is vibrant and sort of gathers together around events or gathers together around sort of. I'm imagining the idea being that central corridor is activated, there's cafe space, there's ins and outs, people are walking back and forth, they both live there, but I could go walk over there for dinner or something like that. I imagine it would be great if there was some sort of centralized, clearly centralized sort of like space. Where are people gonna gather for the thing? I don't know what the thing is, whether it's evening on the green concert, and I'm thinking about what the Essex Experience has done with their little centralized space. They've really activated that and created a reason for people to go there in an event space. I'm not saying you need to mimic that, but I've seen that be successful, and it's a way to make the neighborhood less just for the people who live there. I think some of the concerns, at least in the South End, I've heard about Hula, is it's only for the people with this, at Hula. It's not something that I would go visit as a neighbor resident. I know there's different reasons for that, and I know there's the surf club and all those other things, but I think this needs to be inviting writ large. And the way to do that is, some of it's gonna be programming in the area. And I just would think about that in this a long way, private.
No, that's a really good thought and something that we have been thinking about as is there some sort of either a cultural or a civic or a community type use that can be very, be very flexible.
There have been people on the board by NPA I know who have been talking about a community hub in this space, and I've been working on that. I don't know where they are with that, but I know that is a discussion.
They're trying to figure it out.
Okay.
What's the program, what's the budget,
I had a question on the kind of different options for the streetscape, and in particular, the single pavement kind of curbless design. One piece of feedback I'd have for that, this is slightly different from the main one because it does have a dedicated bike lane. is having some color differential between the pedestrian right of way and the cycling right of way. I know that Germany has like a set color basically, right, where, you know, their sidewalks are mixed, but you know, if you step on this section that you're in the bike right of way, and that will potentially avoid some conflicts. Just want to see it back there, I'd say.
Also, I just want to say I'm fortunate enough to live near Jake's Market in the North End, and I know there are markets around, and there can be complications with bringing another one in, but I would think that this type of development would be ideal for them, some sort of small grocery store.
You know, we do want to think about those amenities that serve the people who live there without them having to get into a car. So whether it's bike repair, markets, pharmacy, whatever, you know, those things that can reduce trips would be great.
So this has been a very engaging discussion, almost for an hour. Trying to see if anyone has any comments from the public. I think you've
I have
heard.
one more.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see.
Yeah, so someone had mentioned like the streets themselves are a little bit more narrow than typical. And then also there was the discussion around if the parkway doesn't work out with the intersection. Is there any concern about emergency vehicle accessibility?
We definitely, I can take that one. We met a few weeks ago with the technical review committee and had some discussion around that. And yeah, the streets will all need to be designed to meet the emergency vehicle requirements, which is generally 20 feet wide, good turning radiuses, and obviously 13.6 clearance. But how we do that will be in the details, and how we do that without like constricting the travel way for the emergency vehicles while trying visually, it could be different materials, different colors, visually constricted for the passenger vehicles, so they're not feeling like they can drive. But absolutely, they need to be able to get through.
And what about if the intersections don't? On the
Parkway, yeah. I mean, there's certainly access at the intersection with Sears and with Lakeside, so there's 2 points of access already. And then there's also that, not that you'd come from the Harrison, but as I mentioned, getting to the Lakeside neighborhood, either on Lakeside or Harrison from an emergency vehicle.
I think that's the beauty of the kind of curveless system, right? If you've got 2 bike lanes beside a road and the fire trucks coming, and everyone's getting out of the way, you've probably got 20 foot clear easy across all of that roads of travel.
Sorry about that.
Okay,
Good.
yeah.
I have a question for Caitlin. Is the railroad bridge there at Lakeside, is there a plan someday for that to be upgraded, or is that good for now and it's good as long as we can envision?
Are you talking about the railroad bridge over Lakeside, not the city's bike pedestrian bridge over Lakeside? Right. We have a pretty solid relationship with the railroad these days. We've succeeded with the Champlain Parkway, which had a number of upgrades to rail infrastructure along the corridor. We'll have to work with them again on the Rail Yard Enterprise project. We haven't talked about this corridor. You know, they are bullish about keeping the transload facility in Burlington. They have. It will likely need to be rearranged for the Rail Yard Enterprise project. There may be dislocations that may need to be accommodated elsewhere. The railroad, you know, is always looking at how to continue and expand their services. And, you know, in a perfect world, I would say the railroad would want their right of way to be unencumbered. We have been very successful in the city over many decades of getting the bike path into the railroad right of way at pinch points. I would just say that, you know, each time we have that conversation, it is a hard conversation to have because they are very reluctant to let other people in their space. We're near their space.
Federal law is pretty powerful.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think it's not a stretch to say, and it's clear that the lawyers all know, the city does not have the power of eminent domain over the railroads, which is one of the few entities that don't have that power. So it makes working with them different than other property owners.
Is there anyone in the audience here who'd like to make a comment, having heard this discussion, knowing that, you know, we don't issue an approval or a decision, or and we'll be seeing a number of other projects come forward.
So Sharon Musher has her hand raised. If anyone else wishes to speak, raise your hand too.
Okay, anybody else? No, just Sharon.
Sharon.
All right, Sharon.
Hi, good afternoon. I came in late, so some of this might have been addressed, but I wanted to echo what one of the planning commissioners said was the shops, et cetera, that are going to be on the ground level. I can't remember if it's first and second story, but I really feel that they really do need to attract people from outside that neighborhood or those 13 acres, but also from not only the south end, but from other parts of the city. I applaud you on the number of housing units. We need housing, and I hope this was addressed in the submission that you presented, but I'm hoping that there will be housing for single, pairs, and families. And the state continues, I watch the local news, and the state continues to make a plea that we need housing, but we need affordable housing. And I feel that our neighborhood code has failed us miserably on that. And so when people talk about missing middle, it makes me concerned because we need affordable housing. So the balance between the housing that we desperately need and not to lose that creative character of the South End, which everyone appreciates, is really tricky business. And so I Innovation Lane, I think it's innovative to try to figure out how you're going to strike that balance, and how you're going to maintain those places where people want to come and create new opportunities for people and stretch our imagination. That's what I think of the South End. I think of it as a mind expanding experience that I don't want lost in this. So I think this is a very daunting task. I understand it was embraced by, at least what I heard was it was embraced by members from the South End, which I'm so pleased about, because that's one hurdle that you've already gone over and succeeded. And I think that because it's so well defined, I think it's a unique opportunity, somewhat like City Place, but not, because City Place is right in the middle of downtown. But it gives an opportunity to really create a space that can accomplish all that we want if done correctly. So I wanted to just weigh in, encourage you to try to find the balance with all the things that have been identified tonight. And I look forward to seeing this being built. I think it will be a very welcomed addition, and I love the partners that have come together. So thank you so much.
All right. Well, with that, I will close the sketch plan and look forward to seeing.
I do have one more.
Okay, I have three questions.
Is North Cross Street and South Cross Street, that is the final name?
No, none of these are. None of these are final.
With that,
Just something a little bit more.
Innovation Lane started out with Spine Street.
Yeah. With that, I'll close the sketch plan.
Yeah. Great.
So we have only one thing to deliberate on, which is from our last meeting. And I think we have Kim here to advise us, so I'll close it, we have nothing else to deliberate on it, but we're not at the last meeting, we don't have to sit for this one.
Interest though, yeah.
It's 501 Pine Street.
Yeah.
Recording stopped.